So, another day dawns and another Pat McGard appears from the shadows in Donegal. How are you this morning, Pat?
I'm grand, Jude. Rainy and overcast here. A typical July day.
Yeah, are you expecting somebody looking out the window there? Or?
Uh, I've been getting smart-ass comments about the fact that apparently when I'm talking to you, I keep looking out the window.
You never know. You never know where your enemies are, Pat. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Excuse me, can I explain before we go on? There's a tree outside my window, and when the clouds go past, the light changes, and I always think there's somebody standing outside the window, so I keep looking out.
Very good. Okay. So we're going to have a word, first of all, about the excellent condition that the coalition in Dublin is in. Smooth integration of parties, very different from each other, and yet somehow they've found common purpose and they're working in lockstep, really.
Yeah.
Fair summary?
You're shoveling on the irony there with the JCB bucket. I think it's the most incompetent start to any government. Day one, Michael Martin appoints his cabinet, and there's nearly a rebellion from the start. Nobody from the west of Ireland, and that's the first one. And so there's nearly a ruction right away. Then within about 3 days, there's Barry Cohen, the minister who apparently was driving on a provisional license for 20 years and had driven away allegedly from a guarded checkpoint, and then he was allegedly over the limit. So he was then forced to resign. What else was there?
Well, don't forget now, he did draw something good out of that, Michal. He got that guy Dara
O'Leary.
He managed to get him a position as a result of Barry Cowan resigning.
Yeah, but then the leader of the Labour Party, the Green Party, Eamon Ryan, was pictured fast asleep in the Doyle.
Can you blame him, Pat? That's quite hard.
Hold on.
They do it all the time in the House of Lords, you know.
Yeah, but then the girl who's the Nessa Hourigan, she's the chief whip of the Labour or the Green Party. She voted against the party, so in other words, she's only in about 3 days. And she votes against, she's the chief whip, and she votes against the government. And then, of course, there's a famous one. There was a guy on the other night on the RTE News. He said he was going to Glasgow to visit his partner. He wasn't going on holidays. He was going over for the weekend and coming back again. And he had his payment, his pandemic payment, the unemployment payment.
Yeah.
Actually, so he said the only person he talked to, two members of the Gardaí Síochána. So the Gardaí must have shared his information with the Department of Social Welfare, and his payments have stopped. Now the government have to backtrack on that big time because there's 2 or 3 things going on there. Number one, where's the data protection? Where's the privacy? If he only talked to 2 Gardaí, why was his payment stopped? The Gardaí have nothing to do with anyone's payments. So the government has just moved from one shambles to another. And, at the incompetence level, by the way, they were also saying if you went off on your holidays, that the payments your pandemic payments were going to stop. Now, Judo, if you think about that for 2 seconds, on the basis that you weren't available to look for work, well, right in the middle of pandemic, if you're, say, a musician, and this is how you make your money, and there's no bars open, there's no clubs open, there's no theatres open, there's no any open, how are you supposed to go out and look for a job in Aldi or something? The whole thing is insane. Now, they just seem to be so incompetent that I don't think there's a hope in hell that they're going to last the full term.
Well, they really do seem to have stumbled into things badly. I mean, from the very beginning, as you say, when Michal was made Taoiseach, how did he not see that he wasn't putting anybody in place all down the west side of Ireland? It really seems like, I don't know. He must have made that decision consciously, and yet, it was such an obvious thing to do wrong. And the other thing was, of course, the guys who didn't get jobs were very loud and public. I mean, they weren't muttering behind the doors that they hadn't got a post. They were saying out loud to the press, I'm really bitterly disappointed.
Dara O'Leary was the deputy leader of Fianna Fáil. Mm-hmm. And when you've seen the efforts that Varadkar made Simon. Apparently, there's only 3 ministers supposed to have a state car. Varadkar made sure that Simon Coveney, his deputy, not only kept on a state car, but he's got a driver and everything else under the sun. By way of contrast, Micheál Martin overlooked his deputy and brought in, I think somebody, a girl from Kerry, Nora Foley. Nora Foley, I can't remember Foley name. Who's nearly and is Minister for Education. He also seriously pissed off Jim O'Callaghan, who was one of his star performers in the Dáil and the media. He was the spokesman for Justice. He's a senior counsel in Dublin, and so on. So he seems to have alienated. Talk about sure-footed. Like he seems to put his foot in a bog every time he moved.
Well, they say that the argument for Simon Coveney keeping his car is that he made visits to the north quite frequently. And as a result, he'd need to have a car and protection that might afford.
Yeah, I'm sure I could come up, but by the way, just to make the point, last night, I don't know if they have gone on holidays today, and last night there was almighty, it was a shouting match that was not very edifying. The government, I thought, was absolutely brilliant. Leo Varadkar came on and said the big parties were being bullied by the little parties, and about speaking time. I thought the arrogance of that statement. Yeah, Breed Smith, People Before Profit, was on RT this morning, and she said basically what the big parties are trying to do is saying the little parties, you're going to have less speaking time because our backbenchers are as much entitled to speak as you are. Right. Now, it seems to ignore the fact that the big parties have all the main speaking times. Breed Smith and people like that will be talking about 8 o'clock at night when nobody's interested, nobody cares, and the main news cycle is totally finished at that stage. Yeah. Even if remember the old joke about Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address? One of the papers missed it, and apparently had a famous line: "Mr. A. Lincoln also spoke." So like it's democracy. You can use anything to make yourself out a victim, I suppose.
Well, I saw where one of the papers said that Sinn Féin were really going along with the government on this. The parties on the left were disappointed with them.
Yeah, what power corrupts and all power corrupts totally type thing. Sinn Féin, I'm not 100% certain, but I think they've gone along with it. But you see, it suits them very much. So they are now the main opposition, and the more time they get to speak, their members to speak, they'll be delighted.
I was reading incidentally the Phoenix, the latest issue of the Phoenix, the satirical magazine in the South, and I see where they are quoting Micheál Martin, where he was rejecting Sinn Féin, and then he went on to talk about his republicanism came from his father, and his father was a man who believed in evolution, and at the same time he was radical. But the Phoenix pointed out that he was certainly a Republican because during the hunger strikes, he signed the petition demanding their demands should be acceded to, and was very public about it, and everybody in Cork knew that. So while his father was able to go along with the demands of violent republicanism, you could say, the guys who were on the hunger strike, his son, Mike Micheál, can't bear to be in the same room as the peaceful Republicans that are Sinn Féin. So
I think Micheál has actually got some sort of psychological problem with Sinn Féin, because even this week he accused Pierce Doherty in the Dáil of some sort of illegality in regard to the funding of his office. In fact, Pierce Doherty went absolute ape about it. He demanded that the Can Corda, or the last Can, I can't remember who was in the chair, to actually offer protection of the Dáil to him. He says, because this is an outrageous slur. Now, Micheál Martin, I think, copped on very quickly. I've made a mistake here, and he says I wasn't accusing the member of any illegality, and Doherty, but he just can't. He just can't. By the way, I remember mentioning to you during the week that a judge, a local judge, well, he's not a guy called Sean McBride resigned after 50 years as a member of. One of the things he cited was the absolute obsession Micheál Martin has with attacking Sinn Féin. He says that he says it just turned people against Fianna Fáil and pushed people towards Sinn Féin. And I think there's an element to it. I know a sinner who loves it every time they have a bash at him. And I says, why? He says, that just turns people, he says, that brings people to us. He says, while we protest about it and terrible, he says, secretly, he says, we know it's working for him. Now, I don't know whether he really believes that, but that's...
I think he's right. And it's the same thing with Trump we're going to talk about in a minute. I noticed that while Sinn Féin does make the odd attack on the government policy in the Dáil, by and large, they're not, it seems to me, as vocal as I expected them to be. And I'm putting that down to the old dictum. They say, never distract your enemy while he's inflicting wounds on himself. That they see that, these guys are tearing themselves apart, and they really are. Like, the Greens are tearing themselves apart. Micheál's party is in a mess. And didn't Leo brief against the government in the early days? Didn't he make some statement that was contrary to what was...
I can't remember. Basically, I know what you're referring to, but half the top of my head. He was basically saying the government's position was untenable on some issue, and he was telling the media this. And this is the guys in the partnership. Now, I can't remember what the issue was, but it was reported at the time. Jude, that's why I said that I think this government, I think a lot of people better keep their powder dry in terms of waiting for an election.
Okay, Pat, 10 seconds. How long would you give this government? How long do you think they'll last?
If they keep going like this, if they make it to about Christmas, no, that's an exaggeration.
Reasonable. Not to change government at Christmas with Brexit coming through and everything else.
If they keep going like they're going at most a year, because the Green Party are already starting to peel off, and I think hey Jude, I can't even begin to explain it. And there's a real hatred at a sort of grassroots level between Fine Gael members and Fianna Fáil. Old Civil War politics and all the rest of it. You can think, hey, come on, we're 100 years on and all the rest of it. But Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael always regarded each other as the real enemies. And now suddenly, to keep Sinn Féin out, they have to work together. And it's not a happy marriage. It's more like a shotgun marriage.
A lot of assault and battery behind closed doors.
Yes, behind closed doors.
Well, let's move to Trump then, with his alarming statement where he said, was it yesterday, that he thought that perhaps it would be an idea. He did put 3 question marks after it, which is very typical of a Trump tweet. But that there should be a postponement of the election because the difficulty of getting to the polls, and because all these electoral ballots that were being posted rather than the vote made in person left the road open for corruption of all kinds and chicanery. I must say that has a slightly familiar ring for me, not because of postal votes, but this idea that the results don't really reflect the true voting pattern. I remember.
What do you mean?
I'm thinking of the SDLP. That was a frequent complaint of the SDLP in the old days, that Sinn Féin were, voting early and voting often, that there was all sorts of monkey business going on in West Belfast and other places, where guys were voting in the place of people who were dead, and people who weren't around, and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, let's come back to Trump. What do you make of it? Is he hoping that he can get it postponed, or?
Jude, I think what he's trying to do, and or as people around him, Trump, he's setting himself up. If I lose this election, I think his ego is so fragile that he's setting up that if I lose this election, it won't be because people don't love me. It's because the system, the deep state and all these people are up against me, and it's all a fraud and so on. Like, for starters, he cannot change the date. Congress has to do that, and there's no way the Congress is going to do that. As far as Mitch McConnell, even normally a staunch Trumpite, says that's not feasible. Even during the Civil War, they had an election and so on. So they're going to go ahead. But Trump, when you think about it, Jude, he is an absolutely fascinating character. The man is there's something, like, they're going to be writing books about this presidency for 50 years because it's beyond, there's a malignancy and a what do you call it? I don't know even what you would call it. Like, he's basically saying, look, I am in power and I don't want to leave power. Now, it could also, of course, the more mundane, prosaic thing is maybe he's scared when if he's put out of that he could be facing jail time, because the Mueller report, which has been basically shelved, could come back into action very quick. Plus, there's a lot of people ready to make allegations against him for a whole host of things. Now, when you're the president, those things are all put in a hold. But I think there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party. There's going to be no. I don't think there's going to be what's that thing they use. Clemency when the president goes out of office, they can sort of quash things. I don't think there'll be much of a mood in the Democratic Party to quash anything when it comes to Trump.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a guy called Bill Maher who I watch sometimes. I'm not sure what channel he's on, one of the Sky channels, I think. But he's maintained he's a sort of comedian commentator, and he's maintained for months, maybe years even, that Trump won't go. Even if he loses the election, he won't. He'll find a reason for not going. He'll say it's a fraudulent election and so on. Yeah. And he actually is saying that already. He's saying this will be the most corrupt election ever in the history of mankind.
With zero evidence to back up his claim.
I think actually it's an effort to distract. That's my guess. Well, partly it's an effort to sow the seeds so he can say this was a rigged election if he loses. But I think there's three things that he wants to distract people's attention from. One is, in the polls, he's doing disastrously badly against a candidate, an opposition candidate, Joe Biden, who hasn't really campaigned at all. Yeah. So that's not good news if you're 10 points and more behind somebody who isn't a particularly outstanding candidate, but who hasn't even started his campaign for the looks of things. So that's one, the polls. The second thing is that the stock market slumped badly a couple of days ago because they're looking at how the US will look after, when and if this bloody coronavirus ever stops. The economy will be in bloody ruin. So that's something he's always played on, the notion that he's made for prosperity and jobs and so on. And the very opposite is going to be the case if they ever get out of it as a medical problem. And the third thing, of course, is the number of dead. They passed last week in the United States, they passed 150,000 dead. Now, that's 3 times as many as died in Vietnam over the whole period of the Vietnam War. So I think those are things that you wouldn't want to have to talk about if you were in Trump's shoes. Anything but that. Have I overwhelmed you with my eloquence, Pat?
No. I thought you know, I thought we froze there for a minute. No, Jude, no, those reasons are absolutely. But I think basically what Trump is at, or where he's at it. I'm maybe throwing out that thing about the election was deliberate. You know, the economic figures come out yesterday, and apparently they are the worst since the Great Depression of 1929. So throw out something about an election to sort of change the terms of the debate and so on. But you know, I think America is living through very, very strange times. The country is seriously divided. Jude, without question, there are parts of America where you can see civil strife is not a million miles away. Places like Portland, Oregon, and there are parts of Florida, and and New York. And there's a disparity between wealth and all the rest. But Jude, as well, when you look at it, there's a lot of things going on in America. You have these big players, like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon. I can't even remember these people have a disparate amount of power, and they're shaping debates. And the rich are actually buying advertising times to promote certain clients and all the rest. Democracy now in America does not belong to the workers or the voters. It's bought and paid for, and it's the best democracy money can buy. And so much for this whole idea that America was the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's the land of the butt and the slave.
It doesn't look too good, especially in Portland. I mean, this thing about federal military going in and grabbing essentially kidnapping people who are demonstrating peacefully and
Yeah.
putting them into unmarked cars and taking
Yeah,
them.
these guys don't
Jeez,
have any
that's,
identification marks. They
yeah,
have masks on their face. But when you think about the danger of that, can you imagine the Looney Tunes and the alt-right, the boys who are the militias? Like, what's to stop them driving down the streets with their khaki uniforms on and reaching for any black protester they see?
yeah.
Like so much for the rule of law.
Yeah, it's scary. It really is scary whenever you see people being attacked. When, of course, there's echoes here too. When you see people attacked who are simply out demonstrating peacefully. You remember
Yeah.
that's what led to the Troubles. It was a very important sort of nudge point for the Troubles was
Yeah.
when you had that march in Derry on October the 5th, 1968, where
Yeah,
the police
Jude,
attacked.
that without doubt that was the catalyst that pushed everything over to the other side.
Yeah.
Up until that day, that everything had, people had been peaceful and whatever, and so on. So, Jude, I think they don't realize how close they're coming to pushing it over the edge in America, and Trump is not helping.
Yeah, I think they're just praying. A lot of people are praying. Certainly, I'm praying that they get rid of Trump in November.
Yeah.
If they don't get rid of him, then my God, there's something wrong with American people. Final,
Yeah.
just because we're overshooting our time, Pat. Just a quick one on this app. There's an app in the south that's designed to tell people if they're in contact with somebody who has been tested positive for the COVID-19 virus, and there's an app in the north. And the minister.
Jude, go on, you tell me about this app because I am delighted because I want the northern version of this because you tell me about it.
Well, the Minister for Health, Robin Swan, was on yesterday. I saw him on the TV, and he was saying this app is very, very, the northern app's very, very good because not only will it tell you if somebody is near you has been tested positive, but it gels beautifully with the one in the south.
So do we need? Hold on, do we need two apps on an island?
Exactly. You've eaten my lunch, as they say. That's exactly what I was going to say. But we know the answer to that. We know the answer to that. The reason that they have two apps is we have to make a distinction. There's a border. This is part of the UK, and we don't want to have too many dealings with these people in the south. But we'll work cooperatively with them.
Jude, here, by the way, one question I am genuine asking: does the northern app sync with the British app?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Swan was very big on that. He said not only do we have north-south connectivity, but we have east-west connectivity as well. Yeah. So it's the best of both worlds, apparently.
Yeah. Well, Jim, by the way, wasn't there some claim that the British spent something like 15 million developing an app that never worked, and I think it was some relationship Dominic Cummins had with the firm that were given the contract. And the south of Ireland, they came up with one that cost something like 700,000 and worked perfectly.
I think that's the case, all right. I think that's because the south cooperated with Apple or whoever the big guys are and adapted whatever technology was given to them, whereas Britain typically said, no, we will create our own app. We'll start at ground zero. So they were busy reinventing the technological wheel. And as a result, it was taking them a long time. Well, that's about it for this week, Pat.
Okay, Jude.
Except you have something vital to say to the nation before we leave.
Unless you want to start talking about COVID again, which I don't think we really want to.
No. I didn't say I'm sick talking about COVID, but that's dangerous. You could get sick. Okay, Pat, thanks very much. Talk to you again.
Good luck.